even if I could just get a little vulnerable here for a second.
Conservatives don't really see it. They don't really care about trans issues when they are trying to ban trans adult care. They see it as kind of like this ideological battleground for, what does it mean to be mentally healthy? What is a woman? What is a man? And that allowing kind of trans people to exist and to access care in this manner challenges kind of those underlying paintings for how they kind of build their foundation of reality. In terms of who is more to blame, in my opinion,
I think it was just yesterday, the UK the NHS banned puberty blockers for kids. So it's like,
yeah, or to be more precise, I think along with a bunch of other countries, they've gone to making it so if you want to pursue this, it can only be done like in a research setting, essentially. It's no longer like the standard of care for children identified with trans. I think that something that you mentioned a couple other times, which has made these conversations so difficult, is it seems like people on the left don't really care anymore about whether or not there is like the fact of the matter if a person is trans or not. But a lot of the conversation has kind of shifted over to this self-ID thing, which is, I was going to say in my opinion, but it's not about it. It's a totally incoherent and ridiculous position that you can like ID as a thing and then you are that thing. Like that wouldn't work for any other category ever. In the history of anything ever. You can't just ID as a thing and be a thing.
It is a good thing to be able to analyze your own brain, to come to conclusions.
And again, I don't think Demon Mama, I'm trying to be very generous when I'm reading into her video. So I'm assuming she's mixing up self-diagnosis with self-awareness of symptoms. I'm going to try to be really charitable when I analyze this video so that I'm not just shitting on her the whole time. But a lot of what she says, I think, betrays a very deep misunderstanding of how just a lot of things work.
Own brain to come to conclusions.
So one of the bad things about mental illness in general is it actually can inhibit your ability to come to good conclusions about your own brain. This is why we talk to other people about like how we're feeling, or we try to give them a list of things that like, I feel this or this or this. This is why sometimes friends and family are helpful in pointing you out to a physician or saying like, hey, go to this or tell them this or whatever. This is why you can bring friends or family sometimes to an appointment and have them take you, right? The idea that you like part of like one of the biggest things in so many different mental health issues, it's not cognitive dissonance. It's a cognitive, I think it might be cognitive distortion is what I'm looking at, where you actually like inhibited. Cognitive distortions are habitual ways of thinking that are often inaccurate and negatively biased. Cognitive distortions are like a really big part of a lot of different mental health issues, and they can actually severely inhibit your ability to draw accurate conclusions about yourself. The idea that you would tell a person with mental illness that they can accurately come to conclusions about themselves and then take a diagnosis to a doctor is actually really harmful, really damaging, and betrays, I think, a deep misunderstanding of how a lot of these things can impact the brain and impact your like cognitive wherewithal to have a good understanding about yourself or your brain or whatever.
Will some people do so poorly? Of course. Their competence is an issue across the board. People can incorrectly self-diagnose themselves. But at the end of the day, the key political takeaway is that we have to self-diagnose.
So you absolutely don't. And the scary thing, and now I'm going to attack the example that people always give as a counter to this is always like, what about your name? Your name can be whatever you want it to be. It's like, yeah, but that's your name. The name is supposed to be whatever you want it to be. But no other category of thing works that way. I think that when you've pushed self-ID a lot, then what happens is of course you can't like challenge somebody on whether or not they are trans because the qualifications for them being trans are them saying that they're trans, even though really that's not the case. Like if I ID right now as trans, that doesn't make me trans. Like the underlying fact of the matter is I'm not, or at least I don't think I am. So yeah, I think to give the argument on the other side though, because I am sympathetic towards it, is it probably feels like for a long time, if you are trans, that a lot of the people that are putting up those roadblocks in front of you to be like, we just got to be sure, they're not really trying to put up roadblocks to make sure you are trans. They just don't believe in it at all. And they're trying to make the process as confusing or difficult or as impossible as they can in order to prevent anybody from taking that treatment. So I can understand where the push from the left comes from to make it more accepting as well. Kind of like when you go to like some like abortion clinics, I think some states try to say that like they have to show you like a picture of like the fetus before you have an abortion, which whether or not you're pro or anti-abortion, like obviously the goal is to try to like make it as difficult as possible if you to actually go through with it, you know?
I remember this was sort of my first hint that the trans shit had in many ways become a cult, was right before I started my medical transition. I sought out like a support group or whatever. It was like the one in my city, and it was I think it was like corporatized as well. Like it was like one of these bigger like Stonewall like something. There was like 20 other trans people in there, and they're all sitting at a round table, and they start talking about how we really shouldn't be using terms like trans woman or trans man anymore, that it should be trans masculine and trans feminine. And you had all these people who had no intention of ever like medically transitioning.
Yeah.
And it's like, to me, that reeks of like, there are fakers with like any mental health condition, any health condition in general. But for whatever reason, the fakers are like defended within the trans shit and by like leftists. I don't really understand that. You know, I did like a whole segment, and I've been getting like fucking eaten alive on Twitter. Well, not eaten alive because I'm still here. On Twitter about it, I was talking about how trans trenders have like destroyed the credibility of trans people, which is this concept of like, you know, objective self-ID, and like trans masculine is as valid as a trans man. And it's like, that to me is some fake shit. That to me is you trying to gain like the social capital of saying I'm trans, but you're not actually transitioning. And so the issue arises when like no one can say that. And then people just feel like they have to just like throw everything out with it. So then it's like, okay, then f- all trans people. Like I so get the f- all trans people perspective, and that can sound like messed up or whatever. But I genuinely think if I wasn't trans, I'd be like, f- all trans people. I'm so done with this because it doesn't make any sense anymore.
Yeah. I had a big trans arc, I guess, on my stream like a year and a half ago, where I was doing a lot of trans debates, a lot of trans discourse. And I, you know, every now and then, if depending on what I'm talking about, I'll solicit from my audience, like, listen, if you're trans, if you're black, if you're a woman, whatever, like email me, like if I'm trying to get experiences, because I don't have these experiences, so I can't know. So yeah, at one point I was like, listen, if you're trans, email me, tell me what it's like, what, you know, what's going on, what am I missing, what am I not missing? And that experience that you just gave, it seems to be really common today, where when you get, I'll call them actual trans people that they have dysphoria, they're trying to transition, especially on college campuses, when they join support groups to try to figure out like, okay, well, you know, where do I go for medication? What do I want to do? Like 95% of the people are like non-binary women that like go by Z's or pronouns. They've got septum piercings, they've got dyed hair, and maybe they wear binders, maybe. But that's all they ever want to do. That's the extent of the transition ever. And then all the conversations are just about like communism and like social issues. And it's like, if you're an actual trans person with dysphoria and you're trying to transition and you're looking to do that, those places, I don't know if they exist for you anymore. Like, as funny as much as people complain about like trans people destroying women's spaces, like the new trans trenders, it feels like have like legitimately destroyed trans spaces. Because holy even if you are trans, there's no possible way that you could open like a trans space, be like, okay, guys, this is for trans people, no non-binaries, and no people that aren't looking like you would get eviscerated by doing that. And then like you said, it's become really hard then for those people. Because now, and this happens to me a lot too, because I think my positions on trans stuff are pretty reasonable, even if I disagree with some people, even if we have some disagreement, I think they're pretty reasonable. But every time I go to argue, I almost feel like I'm being disingenuous, because anytime I give trans arguments, I know that the person I'm talking to has never heard these before. If you argue against me and I'm saying things like, I think some people are trans, they probably need healthcare, we need to figure it out. What they're used to hearing is self-ID is real, any impairment whatsoever to trans healthcare is bigoted, and you have to accept all of these people as their identities. Even in private, you got to do blah, 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 blah. Otherwise, you're a huge bigot. And this is the argument they've heard 99% of the time. So when I come and I wheel out my arguments, like, I know I can be persuasive, but at the end of the day, the other person probably doesn't feel like I'm being genuine. And I don't even blame them, because it's like, I'm probably one of like 12 people that would even say these things, because everybody else wants relentless affirmation, relentless care, relentless transition for children. And it's like, yeah. And then kind of what you said, there's like this broader problem where, I've said this a lot, and I will continue to say this. Kids being radical in school is a good thing. Everybody is radical in school. Everybody who's 18 to 20, all the Vietnam protesters, I'm sure you were, every motherfucker when they're 18, 19, 20 has some crazy shit that they believe.
I was a purple-haired vegan in high school.
Okay, cool. I supported Ron Paul. I was a ride or die Ron Paul fan in college, right?
Were you really?
Yeah, absolutely. Hell yeah. Abolish the Fed 2008. We watched him on TV when he won like one state, and we were like, this is it. He's going to do it. But yeah, so everybody's radical in school. That's nothing to be alarmed about, that kids are being radical. Kids are always radical. The problem now, though, is the aesthetic and the radicalness of kids. It used to be something where it's like, okay, we get it. You're goth, you're seen, you're a libertarian, whatever. You'll grow out of it, you're whatever. But you can't say that anymore, because now it's all about trans. And like the identity is unassailable. You can't say anything bad about it. You can't say, okay, you'll probably grow out of this or you'll figure this or whatever, because now it's like, okay, hold on. Whoa. Like you might have said that kid was goth and he'll grow out of it. I'm not goth now. I'm trans. I'm an NB mask presenting lesbian femme with a huge dick or whatever. And it's like, okay. Yeah, sorry, I'm really, yeah. Oh God, everything is like so, it's so annoying. Yeah.
And here's the thing, it's like there are studies that show, and this is whenever you get into studies about trans shit, this is also like a huge source of frustration for me, because it is so hard to find valid numbers on trans shit. And then like on a personal level, that sucks, because like I would like to know more about like my life and my health and all this shit. But every study that comes out is always so ideologically driven. But there have been a handful of studies on like long-term follow-up on children who have gender dysphoria. And the numbers are all over the place, but it ranges somewhere between 60 and 90% growing out of it after they go through like the main stages of puberty. So that to me informs my opinion that children should not be transitioning, because I can't imagine anything worse than literally like in some cases having your genitals removed, you know, over something that would have dissipated on its own, right?
Or even having like top surgery as a woman, like getting your breast removed. That's pretty traumatic
like,
if you end up,
Then you can't feed your child, or you can't have a child in general, like for real. And then like, to me, that also, this is why, you know, I do have like leftists in my audience, and they want me so hard to drop my stance on anti-children transitioning. But it's like, for me, that stance also secures the rights of trans adults, because the idea that if your gender dysphoria is so persistent that it goes into adulthood and it beats the odds and it is still with you, despite the likelihood that it will dissipate after puberty, that's a reason why you should be allowed to transition. You should be allowed to do what you want with your body. So for me, it's like they shoot themselves in the foot at every time. I think I can break it down to a few simple things that would like not only improve like sentiments towards trans people, which in my opinion are at like, not in my opinion, statistically it's true as well, such an all-time low that like even I, if I could just get a little vulnerable here for a second, get like some anxiety, like going out now, like being out in the world. I'm like, I don't know who the clocking me as trans. I don't know who knows me from the internet and is going to be like associate me with like a pedophile or a predator or whatever the fuck. Like I feel that now. So if I'm feeling it, I know like the average trans person is really feeling it, because in a lot of ways I get like a huge pass from like right wingers that people see as hypocritical, and I get it. I think that if we dropped the kid transitioning thing, which they would never do, but I think if they did, that would be a huge win for us. I also think that dropping the trans women in sports thing, huge win. The idea that not dating trans people makes you like bigoted, like just stop fucking saying that. And so many people that I have like respect for in the trans community say that, and I'm like, are you retarded?
I like those. At least things were simpler back then, because like back then the worst was like, if you won't date a trans person, you're bigoted, and those were like all the conversations. But it was such a minority topic that nobody cared. But now it's like, yeah, like little Timmy is 7 years old and we need to, you know, do surgery. And I was like, Jesus, things have moved so extreme. But I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Like I look at these, you know, state bans on what they say is gender affirming care. I feel like I don't like that phrase. I think that it kind of like waters it down. I don't necessarily love the phrase the conservatives use either, which is like mutilation. But what do you think about the amount of states that are banning it for minors? And then what do you think about the states that are kind of pushing for adult bans as well?
The adult bans are completely and totally indefensible, especially from a conservative point of view. I don't know how you can ever say that like the government should be involved with cutting off this type of care from adults. But the issue from the conservative perspective is that the conservative arguments have now changed, because a lot of conservatives are completely not bought into any trans stuff now, or maybe they never were, and now this is like their mask off moment. I don't know. I like to take people where they're at. I like to assume people are generally being honest. But the issue now is conservatives see it as the same thing as like, would you allow a person to go into a hospital and get their arm cut off? Right? Well, we wouldn't allow that. So why would we allow an adult trans person who's obviously deluded to go in and get any kind of surgery? So I think kind of what I was referencing earlier is conservatives don't really see it. They don't really care about trans issues when they are trying to ban trans adult care. They see it as kind of like this ideological battleground for, you know, what does it mean to be mentally healthy? What is a woman? What is a man? And that allowing kind of trans people to exist and to access care in this manner challenges kind of those underlying paintings for how they kind of build their foundation of reality, right? That those people can exist. So, I mean, obviously, if somebody believes trans people are real, obviously I'm opposed to restricting trans healthcare for adults. Like I said, for kids, like if the therapeutic environment I feel like was more critical or more challenging, and I felt like there was good research being published there, I would probably be, just because of the political optics and where we're at in the research now, I'd probably be okay with moving trans healthcare for minors in the same direction as like the NHS or in Sweden, where they've said, listen, for any type of drug therapy, we're going to do this, we're going to continue to explore it, but it's going to be in a research setting so that we can continue to collect data on it, because holy the research is just not there yet. And anybody on either side, if a conservative tells you that they know for a fact it doesn't work, they're lying. If a progressive tells you that we know for a fact it does work, they're lying. The research, this is all very new stuff. And the research is not quite there yet to tell us what the correct direction is. So I'd probably be okay with it in that sense. And then, you socially transition. If you want to wear a binder, if you want to wear makeup, if you want to whatever, you can do that. But again, also to go back to the beginning, this is such like a minority of a minority of a minority of the population. It's insane how much of the overall political discourse trans issues are taking up now.
Yeah, for sure. I really thought we would disagree more on like the kids transitioning thing. I mean, I'm actually pleasantly surprised because I feel like it would just be such a net positive for everyone just to say, yeah, we're throwing that out, with the exception of, research, because I think that would benefit everyone. But the extent for which it's defended on the left, I think does so much harm. Like when I look at like Target, we mentioned that earlier. When I look at Bud Light, when I look at how radioactive it is now becoming to be publicly supportive of LGBT people, and I see that blame is placed solely on like conservatives, I just don't see that. Like I don't see that that's a rational observation of what's happening. I see it more like a fucking chihuahua that's like biting at a pit bull for years and years and years, and the pit bull finally bites, and everyone's like, see, this confirms everything we always thought about conservatives. Not to say, obviously, people often accuse me of like, being friends with people who secretly hate me. Oh, Alex Jones hates you, Joe Rogan hates you, all these conservatives hate you. I'm fully aware tons of conservatives fucking hate me. Not the ones I just listed, but do you see it as like, which side right now in 2023 is doing more harm, do you think, in trans acceptance, LGBT acceptance? Because I see things getting very fucking hateful, genuinely.
Well, first, I have to stake my position here. To be clear, if we had good research and if we could, like, with a certain percentage confidence, identify trans kids, I'm okay with trans kids being on puberty blockers. I wouldn't say sex reassignment surgery for people under the age of 18, but I am okay with like people going through puberty, taking puberty blockers if we could identify with high reliability who they were. Let me just stake that out clearly. In terms of who is more to blame, in my opinion, politics feels like a game of reactionary versus reactionary, in that what happens is somebody will take a side, and because they don't like it, they go as far to the other side as possible, and then the other side will go as far to the other side as possible. And what happens is people continue to provide further justifications for each other down the line. So, right now, when trans people initially were like, I don't think, conservatives don't think trans people are real, we need to fight for this as much as possible for adults to get healthcare. A lot of conservatives fought against that, a lot. They didn't want to give trans people any healthcare, and now trans people got their stuff. And now, as trans people have gotten their stuff, as they've moved further left and they're fighting over like kids, now conservatives are coming back with like, if conservatives would just come back and they would say, hold on, sure, trans people are real, we don't like it, whatever. Adults are fine, leave the kids alone. Then okay, that would, whatever, fine. We can fight on that battleground, but that's not where conservatives are. Now conservatives are like, transgenderism is an ideology that is rotting society and we need to destroy all of it. Well, with a lot of conservatives pushing that, now people on the left are, understandably, they're going to say like, well, look, we told you the whole time. It's not about the kids. It's about trans issues altogether. Conservatives really do want to get rid of all trans issues. So we need to fight even harder than before for everything. And then now conservatives are like, oh, well, look, they are defending the 4-year-old shit. We told you they wanted to come for your kids. Now we need to get rid of all this LGBT shit. And that's like, it's both sides. Like, and it's like I had a little sister. It's like two siblings fighting, where I don't know if you had any siblings, but the goal is to always like trigger your sibling, like right up to the point where they go and tattle to mom and dad. And then you're like, no, don't do this. You can hit me too. It's okay. But like that's what it feels like. It's like two siblings fighting back and forth, trying to trigger each other into the abyss on both sides. And yeah, so like it's always hard to say like, who do I blame? A lot of those emails, like I said, from those older people, I understand more, where they're like, listen, you go on Twitter and you see these insane fucking trans people say the craziest thing. Well, what were you like in 2010 when you were on Reddit talking about atheism? I don't know if you were part of that group of people. I was. And back then we all tipped our fedoras, as much as we could. Religious people, they're the bane of society and blah, 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 blah. Because why? Because we grew up in Christian families being forced to go to church every Sunday with families that weren't even that religious, and we don't care about it. So of course, when you get to your college years, you're like, fuck religious people. I'm going to tell them how much I hate them. And for trans people, a lot of that is the same. But we've lost the ability to just say, you know, kids are being crazy. Let's have a reasonable conversation about this. And now both sides of the political aisle are just defined by the most reactionary position they can take against the other side that's just triggering the ever living fuck out of them. So if I had to blame a side, I would say the problem is the internet right now, because social media has just blown everything out of control, and all the conversations are being held on TikTok and Twitter by people that haven't even had real jobs yet. That's the issue right now, I think. But
agreed about the internet. To me, it's like the vegan effect, right? It's like you look at like veganism as a movement, and, you know, if anyone is being honest or actually looking at like the people within the movement and the ideology behind it, it's like you can find, even if you are not vegan, even if you're one of these fucking I love meat people, you can look at some of their shit and be like, they had a fucking point. It's like, wow, the pigs really are fucking treated badly. Wow, it might be better for the environment if people ate 10% less meat. But it's like the methods in which they go about it push everyone away. And that's what I see happening with the trans shit too. And I'm not sure how like reversible that is, because to me, the trajectory with like the vegan shit, even though perhaps it's not like a perfect comparison or analogy, it's like people were really, if you also remember, speaking of like the atheism era, there was also like a really strong like anti-veganism like era like on social media. And it's like once
the shirts where it's like, for every one steak you don't eat, I'll eat 3 or whatever, like shit like that. Yeah.
But then like once that was over, people just didn't care anymore. But then like veganism as a movement was just left destroyed. And it's like, that's what I see now. It's like, they're just going to like destroy the fucking trans movement. And it's like, but the difference is like veganism is a choice and like being an actual transsexual isn't. And it's like, these are real people. It's just fucking, it's fucked. I mean, for me, it's like, I see corporations like a huge problem too. You know, it's like in a better climate, maybe putting Dylan Mulvaney with the Bud Light shit wouldn't have done anything, but like maybe pick your people better. Like I agree with libs when they say like representation matters. And so I have a hard time understanding why they pick the worst fucking representatives at every turn. I'm like,
why are you saying
do
building statues of George Floyd to represent the entire BLM movement wasn't a good idea? Right? No, yeah, I know. Yeah, it's really, really dumb. Yeah. But then on their mind, like optics doesn't matter as long as, and this is an issue that I feel with progressives a lot, is like the optics, the argumentation, none of that matters because we have the moral authority. So we'll conduct ourselves in whatever way we see fit. And if you disagree, it's because you're a bigot. And it's like, okay, well, if that's your ideology, if that's your methodology, then of course you're not going to try to justify yourself or care about anything beyond being right, you know?